because everybody else that's logging into that site can then vote and prioritise the importance of what's been nominated. Now, this doesn't only make our R&D organisation much more accountable to the global customer base, it means that we're moving at a speed of light significantly faster than our competitors, because what we're delivering is exactly what wants to be consumed. And we're starting to see that this is taking off across B2B as well as B2C companies. So this is just some examples, and I'll give you a couple of examples of how these companies are leveraging crowdsourcing and the wisdom of the crowds. So the first one is Dell. So Dell launched a site about 2 years ago called IdeaStorm. And one of the interesting things about Dell was that they never believed that a laptop preloaded with a Linux operating system was going to create a market. But interestingly enough, on IdeaStorm, it was something that was nominated by an individual, and it was voted and prioritised by the community, and it became Ubuntu, the Ubuntu product line became one of their top-selling products about 2 years ago, and continues to be a mainstay for them. The second is Starbucks. Obviously the coffee chain in quite a bit of distress a few years ago, and they wanted to recreate the customer experience. A lot of the innovation and a lot of the store design changes that you're starting to see in Starbucks around the world are being driven by their customers. And one of the interesting things is, again, it's an interesting story, is about a year ago, one of the most hotly voted items was coffee cubes. And so the context was somebody said, I drink a lot of iced coffee, and Starbucks put a lot of ice cubes in it, and if I don't drink it fast enough, it becomes a diluted drink. Right? So why don't you make ice cubes out of coffee, or with a percentage of coffee? And I say it, and you think, wow, that seems so obvious, right? But to the employees and the company at Starbucks, they'd never thought of it. And again, it was a light bulb moment. And then the third thing is Crocs footwear. I'm sure they sell that here. It's pretty polarising. If you want to sacrifice style for comfort, it's a great product. If you don't, it's an alienating one. But one of the things that Crocs faced a few years ago was that they really only had one design. And the market for that, or the demand for that, had waned, but they had a massive amount of loyalty. And so they invited the community to basically come to this ideas site, Crocs Ideas. And a lot of the new designs that Crocs have come out with haven't been developed by design teams at Crocs. They've actually been developed and proposed by the community. So it's pretty powerful. The second and the final thing I wanted to talk to you about in terms of what's happening with social networks and in terms of external communities and the way that companies are thinking about it. Everybody can still hear me? Great. You can probably see this slide a little better too. This is really what's happening with customer service and support, is that companies all over the world over the last decade have spent significant sums of money trying to turn call centres into contact centres, into interaction centres. And they've added various channels like email and the web and improve the phone and chat and so on. But almost overnight, the customer base moved to these new online communities. And I know if I have a problem these days, my first port of call is Google, and I try and type it in. If Google doesn't give me the answer, I'll go to Facebook. If Facebook doesn't give me the answer, I'll start complaining on Twitter. And there are some pretty significant brand management implications for this. I was at a conference in Canada a little while ago where a debate broke out as to who owns the customer service function inside a company because of this. Should marketing actually own an issue if it pops up on Twitter or Facebook, or should it be customer service and operations? I mean, it's a lively debate, and everybody's got an opinion. But the point is that companies are becoming increasingly disconnected. And we're starting to see that a lot of companies around the world are looking at social networking and so on to really be able to create more holistic customer experiences. Because if you've invested in Siebel or a major call center implementation over the last few years and think you've got a 360-degree view of your customer, but you don't know what's being said on Twitter or Facebook or various other things, at best you've got a 270-degree view. And so companies are now spending a lot of time thinking about how do they integrate what's going on. And there are some great examples. This is an example of Bank of America, where they've actually taken their own Twitter channel, and they're doing two things really well. The first is that they're monitoring very carefully the conversations that are going on around their brand and trying to inject themselves positively with solutions. The other thing that they've done amazingly well, which I think is pretty interesting, is that they've created a virtual knowledge base. And so they're seeing that as issues pop up on Twitter and the community solves those issues, they're able to bring that knowledge back into their call centre so that the next time somebody calls in with the same issue, the agent has the answer. It's pretty interesting. And then you start to see that this is an example of what one of our customers out of Europe, Orange, one of the major mobile providers, is doing. This is a dashboard they have where they're actually monitoring every reference to Orange that's happening through the customer service support functions. And so you can see there are traditional things like phone and email and chat, but they're also following what's happening on Google and Facebook, and they're looking at the conversation volume and the number of cases that are popping up. So look, this was a reasonably quick sort of fly-through of the way that I'm sort of saying to see companies embrace this. I did mention at the outset that I think it's urgent. One of the things that we often talk about is that we tend to go through computing cycles every 10 years. And we saw that with the mainframe in the 60s and the mini computer in the 70s and desktops and client server and so on. We're really in the midst, but really also probably more importantly at the start of this mobile internet revolution. And what the mobile internet revolution does is it allows every customer to have a voice, but it equally allows every company to have a voice. And so, I think that the need and the imperative for companies to be able to think about how they embrace social networking becomes all the more important. It's inescapable.
Hi, my name is Priya Chetty Rajgopal, and I have this question for both Hari and you, Jeremy. What happens, apart from being a dinosaur, if companies choose not to get onto any of these networks? Because there's just too much information, or there's not the focus or the time to be able to to be able to give the necessary attention. What do you think is going to happen, or how do you think companies which are small or mid-sized or boutique or very service-oriented, what do you think will happen, or what do you think they should do?
I think, thinking out loud, I think there are two things that companies need to be really aware of. I think there was this really interesting article in the Economic Times earlier this week where they were talking about major services firms that suffer from 20 to 30% attrition, annual attrition. And they've started to bring in a lot of these technologies, these social networking technologies, and attrition has gone down by as much as a third. And I think that's because the technology is familiar, it's easy, people are much more productive, and so on. And so I think that what you'll start to see is increasing a distinction between companies that have these new technologies and companies that don't. I think, secondly, if you look at where companies need to go from a brand management experience, I'm not overly familiar with the Indian context, but I enjoy a lot of the sensationalism that comes out of the US every time United Airlines breaks a guitar, or a service rep from Comcast falls asleep on a customer's couch. I think companies need to be really dialed in and very aware to this. I also think there are some revenue generation implications. One of my favourite stories about Twitter was a customer was in line at a Las Vegas casino, and he hadn't been in line for more than 10 minutes, and he tweeted a complaint to his network. And within 2 or 3 minutes, a hotel down the road tweeted back and said, "We'll send a car and give you a 20% discount off the room rate if you come to our hotel." And so you think about it in that context, and these are sort of random things that are happening now. If companies don't want to be part of the the early adopters, they definitely can't afford to be part of the majority. They can't afford not to be part of the majority, is the way that I see it.
Well, from my perspective, I think I agree a lot with what Jeremy said. I think as a company, you have two choices. The conversation is happening whether you're there or not. You have the choice to either participate and contribute to it. At the very least, I would say you should be monitoring it. So many of the companies we talk to in India, they've chosen to monitor this communication rather than actually participate or do something as sophisticated as the Bank of America. This is a good first step, because at least it gives you a sense of the pulse, and it gives you an indication of whether you need to invest in this. So as a first step, you need to pull up your chair to the table and listen to what other people are saying. If you don't, and to Jeremy's point, there are other companies who will, your competitors, because they are listening. And one of the features I was talking about on LinkedIn, for example, people are following your company. They are listening to what people are saying about you. In the very competitive IT industry in India, I know that all the major companies participate in following each other on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere else, and they're watching very carefully. It has implications on the ability to hire, retain employees, retain customers. It's a very, very competitive world out there, and basically you could potentially jeopardize something. I wouldn't sort of throw out the alarm bell, but I would say you definitely need to be listening to what people are saying, because it's happening whether you choose to listen or not.
Next big thing in marketing, and honestly it's not a tool like social media, it would be communities. I think we've heard two speakers who talked a lot about the power of communities, and we haven't really started tapping much into it from a commercial side. Today it's still a social side, but I would imagine going forward communities are going to be the next big thing, because it takes what used to be done at the physical level and makes it very easy for you to now do it at the online level. And I also wanted to acknowledge two other huge community leaders who are here. They luckily are sitting next to each other. So one is Avinash Raghava, who runs the NASSCOM Emerge community, which is one of India's largest communities, 3,000, how many now?
3,200 or so.
Yeah, 3,200 very relevant members there. And Tapan Garg from the CIO Club, and who runs, how many is that now?
1,900.
1,900 CIOs groups. So I think we're seeing something new, and I would encourage all of you to participate.